Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Chris Goodwin with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History. Welcome to this week's History is Lunch program, which is sponsored by the John and Lucy Shackelford Charitable Fund of the Community Foundation for Mississippi. We're in our home, the Craig H. Nielsen Auditorium in the Museum of Mississippi History and Mississippi Civil Rights Museum, and we're streaming live on both Facebook and YouTube, where those videos are available to watch anytime afterwards. And if you've not already done so, please silence your cell phones. Mark your calendars for Sunday, October 15th, when at 2 p.m. here in this auditorium, we'll screen the documentary The Only Doctor, which tells the story of Dr. Karen Kinsel's effort to keep her rural clinic open in Clay County, Georgia. Following the film, there will be a conversation between director Matthew Hashiguchi and Dr. Tamika Simmons of the Delta Health Center. And then I hope you'll join us next week for History's Lunch when Freedom Rider and Tougaloo alum Joan Trumpower Mulholland will be here with her son Loki Mulholland to discuss their book, Get Back to the Counter. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Katie Blount and Miranda Vaughn to discuss MDAH projects and Archives Month activities. Katie Blount has served as director of the Mississippi Department of Archives and History since 2015. She began work at MDAH in 1994 and served as deputy director for communication before becoming director. Blount earned her BA in English and History from the University of Michigan and her MA in Southern Studies from the University of Mississippi. Miranda Vaughn is an archivist in the graphic records section of MDAH. She earned her BA in History from Mississippi University for Women and her MLIS from the University of Southern Mississippi. Vaughn is vice president of the Society of Mississippi Archivists and the Mississippi Representative and Programming Committee Chair for the Southeastern Archives Association. We'll hear first from Miranda Vaughn about Archives Month, then from Katie Blount about projects at MDAH. Help me welcome Miranda Vaughn.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you to the department for allowing me to speak about something that I, and probably many of you in this room, are passionate about, which is archives, and particularly the celebration of archives. So October is American Archives Month. So I wanted to talk to you for just a few minutes about what American Archives Month is, why it is, and how the public can support and engage with archives in Mississippi. American Archives Month has been a nationally recognized event since 2006. It was created to promote public awareness of and engagement in archives, and its goal is to ensure that society values the vital role of archives and archivists. So as part of American Archives Month, you have repositories all over the United States who put together special programs and things. But one very notable part of Archives Month is Ask an Archivist Day. The public on Ask an Archivist Day can use the hashtag Ask an Archivist on social media to ask your hard-hitting questions to archivists across the country, and they'll have a chance to respond. This is a great way to not only educate the public on what archival work is, but to break down barriers that may make archivists seem inaccessible. We do kind of, in the archive field, get a reputation for being, I don't want to say basement dwellers, but just a little bit on that like dark and mysterious side. I think the Village Voice once referred to us as keepers of the secrets, which I always really enjoy. I think that makes my job sound a lot more mysterious than it is. So a lot of times we can be, in the public's eyes, a little bit more inaccessible, and so this is a great way to engage the public. Now I'd like to briefly mention archives in Mississippi. I think everyone in this room would agree that Mississippi has a rich and complex history, and we are very fortunate to have archival repositories across the state who collect and preserve documents, photographs, audiovisual materials, and the like that tell stories of Mississippians from all social and cultural backgrounds. On a personal level, I want to say, as an archivist, I am very proud to be a part of not only staff at MDAH, but also on a broader level, the whole profession of people who really recognize that it's important to get all perspectives in order to convey that complex history. And so I'm really happy to be a part of a staff of people who work diligently to tell everyone's story so that we can tell all the perspectives. I just want to give a few examples of some archival repositories that we have here in our state. Mississippi's universities and colleges, both public and private, are major repositories for our archival collections. The photo you see here is the John Grisham Room at the Mitchell Memorial Library on the Mississippi State campus. This room is an exhibit space, and it's also a conference room that you can use. In this room, you can view a number of items from the John Grisham collection, both related to his career and to his personal life. It's really cool. If you're ever on campus there, I encourage you to check it out. I'd also like to highlight Mississippi's public libraries and historical societies and courthouses. These repositories collect records on a local level, and they're so important for genealogical research and for local history researchers in the state. These records are often looked after by a small staff or sometimes by volunteers. So the archival work that they do is often just doesn't get as much publicity as some of the larger repositories. So they are important. They provide resources for Mississippians in rural areas specifically who maybe can't travel to Jackson to research here at the archives or to the nearest university. So they're very important in maintaining archives in those rural areas. Mississippi also has a growing number of digital collections. As society becomes more and more tech-based, obviously archives are going in that direction as well. And so it's a really great thing that we've been able to nationwide, worldwide, make more collections available digitally to the public. It means more collections get out there and get seen by more people, so it's always a good thing. The Mississippi Digital Library is working with a number of institutions across the state to digitize collections, and many of our institutions individually have their own digital collections available on their websites. And for example, some notable digital collections that we have here at MDAH include the Medgar Wiley and Merle Beasley Evers papers, and most recently, the Eudora Welty collection. And those collections can be accessed on the MDAH website. And there are multiple projects going on at any given time at any repository in the state of Mississippi. But I just wanted to highlight a few that some of you probably already know about, but I think they're really interesting. I think they really reflect a collaborative effort in the state of Mississippi. So first, I want to talk about Tales from the Crypt, which is an award-winning collaborative project with history students from the Mississippi School for Math and Science and the Billups Garth Archive at the Columbus Lowndes Public Library System. For this project, students use primary sources available in the archives to research individuals who are buried in the Columbus's historic Friendship Cemetery. And they'll use that research to perform as those individuals at Friendship Cemetery during the spring pilgrimage. This project is a great opportunity to expose high school students to an archive and research with primary sources, which actually you don't really see a lot of on the high school level. Usually even, beginning college, you don't see a lot of it. It's usually later college and into like grad school that you get to actually go into an archive and research. So it's a great opportunity for younger people to come in and see what archives are all about. I also want to mention the Lantern Project. It's another collaborative project. It's led by Mississippi State University, and it includes partnerships with a number of universities and libraries and historical societies in Mississippi and a few in Alabama as well. The Lantern Project provides, for the first time, a centralized and institutionally supported access to information and legal records documenting enslaved persons, including probate records, court records, deeds, receipts, bills of sale, and any documents that could have been used in evidence in a trial. If you've ever tried to research anything about enslaved people or done any kind of African American genealogy, you know what a challenge it can be. So the Lantern Project is a really big game changer for genealogists and researchers alike. And I also wanted to mention here at MDAH, we have for many years now provided research workshops to the public, and among those workshops, probably the most popular are our genealogy workshops. Throughout the year, our reference staff here provides focused workshops on topics like military records, land records, African American ancestry. They really hone in on those specific topics, so you're not just getting general genealogy, but you're getting those like specific topics. These workshops are free to the public, And they allow the opportunity for attendees to utilize our collections and our reference library. Our next workshop actually will focus on land records, and it will be on Saturday, December 2nd. You'll be able to register for that workshop a few weeks before, so keep an eye out on our website and on our social media for information about registration. You can also check out these workshops on our YouTube channel. We post them after the fact, so check those out as well. And finally, I just wanted to give you guys some ways that you can support us. Obviously, those of you who are here today are supporting us by showing up, and we appreciate you. But the number one way you can support Archives during Archives Month or throughout the whole year is just to visit us, to utilize our collections, come to programs like this. You can write books or start a podcast or make a documentary also. That's helpful. As an archivist, I can tell you that we see a lot of stuff come through, but we don't actually get to do deep dives into those collections the way researchers can. So we essentially prepare the research materials for the researcher to come in and actually do those deep dives and interpret them and hopefully get them out into the world a little bit better. So whether you go in person or whether you're just utilizing digital collections from home, the best thing you can do for archives is to use them. You may also want to consider donating a collection. If you have family papers or any collection of documentation or media that you feel has significant historical value, definitely consider contacting an archive and seeing if it's something that they would want to add to their collection, because obviously we don't have archives if we don't have collections. So consider that as well. Another way you can support archives is to advocate for us. Talk to your representatives, talk to your city councils, let them know that archives are important and that they should be prioritized when it comes to budgeting and publicity and all of that. We definitely need advocates out there. And finally, if you're able and you have the time, definitely consider volunteering at an archive near you. Ask any archivist on the planet and they will tell you there is a never-ending amount of work. So most repositories welcome volunteers, interns. If you are interested in volunteering, or if you're a student and you're looking for internship opportunities, or you know a student who is, definitely check out an archive. If you are in the Jackson area and want to volunteer here at MDAH, I've put the contact information for Erin Blackledge, our volunteer and internship coordinator. Her contact info is here on the screen. Definitely contact her. She can help you set you up wherever she needs you to be. So again, I want to thank you guys for your support for the work that we support of the work that we do here at MDAH and in repositories across the state. And so that's all I have. I'll turn it over to our director, Katie Blount.
Am I on? Yes. Thank you, Miranda. That was great. It's great to be here at History is Lunch. I see many friends out in the audience, notably Chrissy Wilson, who hired me here at Archives and History 100 years ago, and who started the History is Lunch program. I see many History is Lunch stalwarts, and please know how much we appreciate you. And if you are new to this program, please come back. We do it every Wednesday, and it's always interesting. I'm happy to have a chance to update you on a number of major projects that we have underway here at Archives and History. Before I do that, I want to briefly introduce one of our wonderful board members and also a former member of the Mississippi Flag Commission, T.J. Taylor. We have a very strong, very supportive, and politically independent board of trustees, and that is the secret of our success. So thank you, TJ. I also want you to see the staff who do the work that I am up here bragging about. MDAH staff, please stand. We have the best staff in state government, and as we go through these projects, I know they're going to be thinking, and sometimes they say it, Katie, why are we doing all of this at once? And that is a fair question. But I know they can do it. They show it every day. They're outstanding, and thank you all. So after we opened these two museums in 2017, we knew that we needed to focus on our sites around the state, several of which were in urgent need of attention. We began with Windsor Ruins. This is a fascinating project, and rather than hear me talk about it, I'm going to play a brief video that talks about the project.
We're at Windsor Ruins in Claiborne County, Mississippi. Built in 1861 by artisans and craftsmen from New England and Europe with enslaved labor, and burned in 1890. Windsor was once of Mississippi's largest mansions, but has become one of the state's most recognizable and iconic sites as a ruin. The remaining 28 columns and pedestals, built with stuccoed brick and topped with cast iron capitals, have withstood the elements for 132 years. However, the wind and rain have taken its toll on the columns. In the 1970s, efforts to preserve the columns ran into a lack of knowledge of historic materials and how they interact with modern techniques and solutions. Coating the columns with Portland cement stucco in an attempt to protect the columns from moisture began trapping moisture inside of them. Scraping the site of the fire debris to make it look nicer and give it a park-like setting also destroyed the potential for an in situ archaeological study. The application of herbicides to prevent plant growth on the capitals and columns has introduced an untold amounts of salts that have led to a condition known as salt jacking, where chemicals are applied in a liquid form that penetrate into the substrate of the columns, and when the salts dry, they crystallize and exert a tremendous amount of pressure on the materials, causing them to crack and fall. MDAH hired architectural conservator George Four to study the columns and recommend preservation treatments. From that report, we learned some very alarming information. The columns have lost over half of the stucco and loses another 7% a year. Every cast iron capital is broken, and we lose about 3 to 6 pieces every year. 3 cubic feet of masonry is lost annually due to erosion and deterioration, and the deterioration of masonry was significant enough in some columns that it was feared that the total collapse was imminent in more than one of them.
So the columns are now stable. Phase 1 is complete. Phase 2 is the stabilization of the cast iron, the ornate capitals at the top of the columns. That's underway. And then phase 3 will develop new interpretation at the site. One fascinating and important story that has not been told there is that of the enslaved people who built the house and worked on the plantation. More about that soon. Once we shored up the columns at Windsor, our next priority was Grand Village of the Natchez Indians, the last ceremonial mound center of the Natchez people in their ancestral homeland. During a period of intense conflict between the Natchez and the French, Grand Village was the site of a battle in 1730 that led ultimately to the expulsion of the Natchez from Mississippi. Grand Village is a sacred site to the Native Americans and a National Historic Landmark. MDAH acquired the site and opened a museum in the 1970s. This is an early preservation project for us, and we're very proud of it. But as these images will show you, it's past time for an update. We really have not spent significant funds there since we opened the museums in the 1970s. So the exhibits are out of date. They don't center Native voices. The auditorium is way too small. We have wonderful, very successful, popular programs there every year, and they have outgrown the space that we have. Refreshing this site is long overdue. We will build a new museum featuring new interactive exhibits and audiovisual experiences with a focus on school children. We'll also construct a large outdoor pavilion that will accommodate school groups, summer camps, and community events. We're working with a team of architects and a museum firm to plan the interpretation. and will work closely with the tribes, especially the Muskogee, the tribes have determined the Muskogee have the closest ancestral ties to this site, so they'll be our lead partner in planning the interpretation there. And then we'll also, of course, consult with members of the community who have loved this site and used it over generations. We envision Grand Village as a state-of-the-art museum telling one of the most important stories in American history. Historic Jefferson College, just up the road from Grand Village, is known as the birthplace of Mississippi. Delegates gathered there in 1817 to write the state's first constitution. This is the monument commemorating Mississippi's first constitutional convention there on the grounds. MDAH has operated the site since 1977. We did a meticulous restoration of the 8 historic buildings there when we first took the site on, but it's long overdue. The buildings are long overdue for restoration again. So that's what we'll do first, is restore the buildings. That's underway now. And then we'll develop a new interpretive center featuring exhibits exploring the rich and fascinating history of this region. Historic Jefferson College will be a gateway for visitors, sharing the powerful stories of the Native American experience, conflicts among colonial powers, westward expansion, statehood, slavery, Civil War, and Reconstruction. Jefferson College served briefly as a freedmen's bureau after the Civil War. So the site will connect closely with nearby Forks of the Road, which is now operated by the National Park Service. We're working with them to plan interpretation at both sites. We will bring visitors to Jefferson College and then send them out to see the places where history happened. We're also planning to open a historic preservation field school at Jefferson College. It's the perfect place for it. Students can stay on campus and gain hands-on experience in preservation trades. They'll earn credit toward degrees at Tulane University, Mississippi State University, we hope ultimately, Colin, Alcorn, and the Natchez Adams School District is coming on as a partner. So they'll earn credit toward their degrees while training for well-paying professions that are in great demand in this region. If you've ever tried to find a skilled craftsperson to work on a historic building, you know that's true. In fact, we had to bid the roof project at Jefferson College 3 times before we found a contractor. The Mississippi Legislature has provided $10 million for these projects, Grand Village and Jefferson College. We are very grateful for their vision and their generous support. The Mississippi Legislature has been really, really good to this department. Our fellow institutions in other states have suffered terrible budget cuts over the last couple of decades. They've been placed under political agencies, and it's been a hard time for them. In Mississippi, the state has never invested more in our work. So please, please thank your legislators. We have Senator David Blount here today. Thank you, Senator Blount, for your support. Pictured here with me at Jefferson College is Senate Appropriations Chair Briggs Hobson and his wife, Allie. Senator Hobson is a major and strong supporter of this department from Vicksburg. I always like to thank him for what he's done for us. We've also secured $500,000 in federal funding, so you need to thank your members of Congress too. And we're seeking more support from the federal government, the legislature, and from private funders. We just last week announced a generous gift of $250,000 from Entergy, Mississippi for the Preservation Field School. And you see a group of us here, including Mississippi Entergy CEO Haley Fisackerly. You remember Entergy was one of the first companies to stand up and support these museums with a very generous gift. They have stayed with us. Haley Fisackerly is a great friend to this department. So these were the major projects on our plate as 2023 dawned. And then in the closing days of the legislative session, we learned of a new opportunity to expand our work. The legislature has directed MDAH to work with the Friends of the Vicksburg National Military Park and the National Park Service to construct a state-of-the-art visitor center on property adjacent to the park. They provided $10 million to launch the project. We are thrilled to play a leading role in telling the monumental story of the Vicksburg campaign. The military park is the most visited historic site in the state, and the story we will tell there connects closely with the work we're doing at our other sites. So let's talk about the connections among our sites. They're fascinating, and we now have an opportunity to explore them in new ways. The heart of the story that we will tell at Jefferson College is cotton, slavery, Civil War, and Reconstruction. At Forks of the Road, Natchez had the second largest slave market in the United States just before the Civil War, trailing only New Orleans. The labor of the enslaved people in the cotton fields created a wealth so vast that on the eve of the Civil War, Natchez was the richest city in the country and Mississippi was the third richest state. The Civil War was fought over slavery, and Vicksburg was one of the major turning points in the war. Vicksburg is the key, President Lincoln famously said, and the war can never be brought to a close until that key is in our pocket. The Vicksburg campaign involved more than 100,000 troops and ultimately delivered control of the Mississippi River to the Union. Just down the road from Vicksburg stands Windsor Ruins, as I mentioned, built by enslaved people just before the Civil War. General Grant and his troops landed at Bruinsburg nearby and marched onto this property during the Vicksburg campaign. The mansion served both Union and Confederate troops as a signal station and hospital as fighting encircled the property. Enslaved people throughout the region fled plantations and attached themselves to Union forces, who declared them contraband of war. Others were conscripted to fight for the Union Army. Some of these formerly enslaved people may have lived at Jefferson College when it served briefly as a Freedmen's Bureau after the war. In another fascinating connection, Windsor Ruins is surrounded by Indian mounds that were constructed before the mounds at Grand Village by ancestors of the Natchez people. We'll highlight this connection at both sites and encourage visitors to go to each site to get a full understanding of the story. This is just a hint. The connections among these stories and sites run deep. We're only now just beginning to learn how deep. As we dig into archival records, consult with scholars and our Native American partners, and reach out to people in the region with family connections to these places and stories. Pictured here are Nancy and Griffin Wilson, whose forebears were enslaved in this area. They have many descendants here and across the country who are helping us tell this story. So I want to just elaborate on something I said a minute ago. We have not found this yet, but it is possible that an enslaved person was marched from the East Coast down into slavery in Mississippi, marched in front of Jefferson College to Forks of the Road, was sold at Forks of the Road, was enslaved at Windsor Plantation, fled Windsor Plantation, or was conscripted by Union troops during the Vicksburg campaign, and then fought in the campaign, and then lived at Jefferson College after the Civil War when it was a Freedmen's Bureau. Believe me, we are looking for that person. Each of these sites will illuminate a piece of a larger story that is central to American history and continues to shape our world today. When existing sites like the two Mississippi museums are linked with the sites I've talked about today, and others including the U.S. Grant Presidential Library and Museum at Mississippi State University, visitors will experience these places as never before, and they will understand America as never before. We're excited to be making progress on each of these projects, and we're grateful for the support of the legislature, the federal government, and you, our audience, our supporters and friends, and in many cases, our generous donors. This work is important, and we could not do it without you. I want to mention one more exciting new project. Thanks to a donor introduced to us by Foundation for Mississippi History board member Mike Espy, we have the initial funding for an important enhancement here at the two museums. We plan to replace the failing Eudora Welty Library building, which the city has declared that they will no longer commit public funds to it because its condition is too far deteriorated. The library system has voted to move out of the building. We will replace that building with a new public park that will create a spectacular vista between the two museums and State Street, better connecting this site to downtown. As you know, when you walk out of this building today, you see a cell tower, some abandoned water tanks, a dumpster, and the back of this building that has seen better days. We think we can do better for you. We will also help the city and the Jackson Hines Library System find a new location downtown for the Welty Library, which will be continue to be known as the Welty Library. That is really important, and it's not just important to us at Archives and History. Obviously, we love Eudora Welty. It's also important to the city and the library system, so I believe that will happen. The Mississippi Legislature has generously provided support for this project, and we will be raising additional funds to complete it, and we will keep you posted as we move forward with this project and all of them. And that's it, and thank you very, very much for being here, for your support and your attention today, and I will be glad to answer any questions you may have, and where'd she go? Miranda, the same.
If anyone has a question, you can raise your hand. We'll bring the microphone to you. Steady as a rock, and Webster.
Let me have it.
Well, a question or a comment.
Yes.
Who on the staff is going to be the lucky person to try to find that African American who, from slavery to Windsor, to, war, blah, blah, blah. Is that Allie and her crew, or a special research project?
If that person exists, Allie will find.
All right. Well, I had a thought. Seriously,
Okay.
I had a thought. Where I would start would be the Freedmen's Bureau bank records, because we have bank records from Natchez.
Great.
And that would be a Freedmen's
Great.
person names. And good luck finding a soldier.
Well, Michael Morris did a lot of wonderful research on this project and had a couple of people working with him looking at the Freedmen's Bureau records that are now online, and he found a lot of interesting material. Sarah Campbell here, she's been working on it too. We've connected with descendants of enslaved people in this area who are helping us do the genealogical research and helping us track down other people. So we're really building a network of people who are connected to these stories and interested in them, and we're learning things we never knew before. Allie is thinking, I just don't know about this person. The person may not exist, but if you think about it, these sites are in close proximity, and these events happen close in time, so it is possible.
Hey, Katie, thanks for the update.
Yeah.
Do you have a timeline, estimated timeline for the green space?
For the green space, that one will happen pretty quickly. Now, I should say, and this is important, the Welty Library is a publicly owned building over 50 years old. It is not a Mississippi landmark, but it is a historic building. And so as soon as we are able to acquire the building, which we're working on every day, and the city wants it to happen as much as we do, we will begin the historic preservation process that will include a period of public comment and then a request for a demolition permit to the Board of Trustees. So that process will happen, but I hope that if all goes smoothly, that the building will come down in early next year, and we are already, in case that happens, we are already working with a national park development firm to draw up plans for the park. And it will be mostly green space, probably a small stage, and a children's, not a playground, but a children's play area, and paths and trees and so forth. So that one will move more quickly than, say, Jefferson College.
over here asked a question that was also on my mind, and that is, where do you start trying to locate someone that connected all of those sites? An enslaved person. I'm saying,
Right,
all the way.
right.
Do you start at the end? I mean, what are the things that you would be looking for?
We're starting, I mean, well, Michael really would be better to answer this question. We started with you just nod or shake your head, okay? We started with the Freedmen's Bureau records. And Sarah Campbell, who's also working on this, who grew up in Port Gibson, was telling me a story just the other day about a white woman who was writing about the enslaved people who worked for her family and writing about them with great intimacy. And so this researcher was looking at this woman's generation, the white family, for records of owning these enslaved people. And then it finally occurred to her that she probably grew up with these people. So she went back a generation in the white family and found the records. So it's really, and Allie, I mean, this is the kind of work Allie does every single day. It's really piecing it together. And whether or not there's one person who fits the description that I offered, what's important to us is to learn as much about these untold stories as we possibly can. And our archivists and researchers know a lot more than I do about how to do that. Michael wrote a wonderful paper that will be published in the Journal of Mississippi History about the Freedmen's Bureau at Jefferson College. And then we had another researcher write a paper about Jefferson College as one of its great distinctions is that it is the most intact college campus of its era in the country, because it pretty quickly declined in enrollment as the state established the public universities. And so, you know, buildings were not torn down or replaced, and buildings were not added, and it really looks as it did, much as it did when it was established. So these are the kinds of stories that we're researching and trying to dig out. And Allie can, if you want to talk to Allie or Michael after, they can tell you more about or Ann, who's our retired head research librarian before Allie. They can tell you more about what you can find in individual records. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm wondering if there is any information, or if you've done any research on Black people who were not slaves. I'm hearing more and more about Moors that were already here before the slaves were brought over, and are they included in the records anywhere?
Again, I'll dodge the question about the specific records that contain those stories, because I don't know. But that's a very important question about Black people during this period who were not enslaved. And it's especially important in Natchez, where there were many such people. There's a wonderful site that the Park Service operates there, the William Johnson House, that tells the story of a free Black businessman who kept a diary. So that is certainly a resource, but there are the lives of freed Black people during that period is a really, really important part of this story.
One of the pictures you showed was of Nancy Wilkins Wilson and Griffin Wilson.
Yes.
Do you have any information on the Wilkins family?
Do you know, Michael?
She's on, the Wilkins name is on my family tree, so that always
great.
catches my eye.
Michael will be talking to you after this presentation.
Thank you.
I mean, that's how we found them, is through people who are still living in the area, right?
They wrote the whole family tree. We can trace this to all of them.
We're really thrilled about this story.
Okay, thank you.
It's me again. Two things. Just because you made me think of it when you were talking about Natchez and the free blacks and everything. You know, we used to do a Natchez Historic Conference a couple of years back. We did it for years. And there was a great book published, The Black Experience in Natchez. So I hope y'all are using that as some of your resource material.
Michael's read it.
Then, my next thing, this was originally what I was going to ask. I read in the paper that the department is working with the public library to find a new
Yes.
library space. How is that going?
It's going well. I won't say much about that because while we are helping them, it is not up to us where they wind up. But we have made it clear to them that we are interested in supporting this effort to keep the Eudora Welty Library in downtown Jackson. The way we can help is that if they wind up in a historic building, we can provide grants through the Community Heritage Preservation Grant Program for the restoration of the building. So we'll do everything we can to help with that. It's important.
A couple of comments from Sarah Campbell from the live stream. She says that we've discovered records of at least 12 formerly enslaved men from Windsor Plantation who served with the USCT. And then also that we do have records of 3 black property owners in the Windsor vicinity. So, any other questions from the audience? And Webster adjacent.
Okay. Well, first of all, Katie, thank you for your excellent leadership of the Department of
Mary.
Archives and History, and for informing us about these exciting projects. If you can, could you please fill us in on what the department's plans are for the Old Capitol Museum
Yes.
and the Manship House Museum?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for asking about those 2 buildings. Back to when we opened these museums, we knew that we wanted to focus on our sites around the state. So we took a look at all of them, and we looked at basically 2 issues. One, did we have historic structures in disrepair, their physical condition, endangered? And the answer was yes, and the most urgent was Windsor and the second, Jefferson College. And we also looked at the reason Grand Village is on the list was because it had so much potential. I mean, it was already making a bigger impact than that property was ever, built to handle. So when we looked at our sites here in Jackson, the Eudora Welty House has a couple of other sources of funding, including the wonderful Eudora Welty Foundation that supports our work there. The Old Capitol has another source of funding from the legislature. The legislature has set aside money for the Old Capitol, the New Capitol, the War Memorial, and the Governor's Mansion. The Old Capitol is in, both Welty and the Old Capitol are in outstanding shape. They are well preserved and well maintained. The same is true of the Manship House because the Department of Finance and Administration recently did a major project on that building. Now, the Welty House is going great guns. The Old Capitol and the Manship House, I think both are in need of a new vision and new interpretation. It is time at both of those buildings, and I look forward to watching my successor do wonderful things there. But we couldn't do them all at once, and we had to prioritize the ones that were in disrepair physically. I will say that the Old Capitol is as well used as ever. We have public programs there. We have weddings and wedding receptions there. We do programs, and then we also rent the space to others. And we are about to move our entire programs and communication division into there's office space in there as well as public space. And we're going to move them there because we are outgrowing the Winter Building and the 2 museums. So the Old Capitol's in good shape in the meantime, but I think there is enormous potential to do something big there in the future.
Years ago,
Yes, Jane.
there were major projects of copying newspapers from around the state and also county records from the courthouses.
Mm-hmm.
And those are on microfilm at the archives now. Many of the county's records end in the teens, 100 years ago. And the newspapers, well, one thing is are the newspapers that are now digitized on newspapers.com, are they from archives records?
Some of them are.
Okay.
We partnered with them in that, with the Library of Congress in that project.
Okay, well, there are a lot of holes in that too. Almost nothing from the coast, a lot of other local papers that are not represented in those microfilms. I'm wondering if you have any projects that bring those county records and the newspapers more up to date.
Yes.
And also, many of the county records are really, really hard to read on the microfilms because of different amounts of light and shading and blue paper and all kinds of things. So updating would be really helpful to researchers. Do you have any projects in any of those arenas?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you. And Miranda talked a little bit about local records in courthouses. The department does not hold local and county government records. However, we do have a program established by the legislature to help municipalities and counties take care of their records, to help them decide what needs to be kept and what can be disposed of on what schedule. There are record schedules for those records just as for state government records. The services that we offer the counties are paid for through a filing fee on local and municipal and county records. Municipalities are required to participate in this program. For counties, it's optional. Our wonderful local government records staff has all but a handful of counties now participating. What that means is they collect these fees, they keep half of the money, they send the other half to us, and we use that money to provide services to them. In recent years, we've gone out to every single county and helped them assess their records, organize their records, and give them advice on what they need to do to house them, keep them in better condition. We then provide grant funding out of that program to enable them to buy shelving, to deal with temperature, humidity control issues. So we are working very closely with cities and counties to ensure that they have the resources they need to take care of their records.
Thank you. Thank you for that very enlightening presentation. My question is, the word Windsor that is used, is it in any way connected to the British royalty? Because Windsor Castle, is there any?
That's a great question. Only Chris Goodwin would know the answer to that. Do you have any idea, Chris?
I suspect, yes, but no, I have no idea.
You know, like. We'll hear from Sarah in a second. She's at her desk.
Right. I have a question for Miranda. You had talked about Ask an Archivist. What are some of the questions that folks have asked? I mean, what might folks ask an archivist profitably?
It runs the gamut. I mean, it can be anything from what's the most interesting object or document or whatever in your collection to things that have more to do with like archival practices, digitization, and that sort of thing. I mean, it just whatever you feel like asking, really. It can get really fun. I personally like to ask the fun questions. But yeah, just anything that you want to know, someone will chime in. So.
What would you like someone to ask an archivist?
What would I like for them to ask?
Yeah.
How can we help you raise more money and and to get more collections digitized and all that? That would be probably ideal. And then they write me a check, or write us a check.
I have another thing that I've been wondering about is this summer I visited the mound outside Natchez, and for someone who just going there not really understanding the history or the significance of it. It's kind of boring. So, do you have any plans for programming or tour guides or something?
Yes. She visited, did you go to Grand Village or to Emerald Mound? Emerald Mound. Emerald Mound is a super impressive, great big mound just off the Natchez Trace, very near Jefferson College. That site is operated by the National Park Service, not the Natchez National Park, but the Natchez Trace National Park. So we don't operate Emerald Mound, but I think you could say the same of a visit to Grand Village, because as I said, the exhibits are just out of date and not engaging, and that's exactly the kind of experience that led us to realize it was time to do better, because this story is fascinating and so important. And we don't want people to walk away from any mound site and think that was boring. And of course, there's the wonderful Mound Trail that runs along the western side of the state, identifying mound sites, some of which are on private property.
As predicted, Sarah Campbell is... Not connected to Windsor in England. The first mention of the plantation's name that we can find is 1867 in legal records. Prior to that, it was called the Daniel Plantation.
Which was the family name.
I was just remembering, across the river from, what is it, St. Catherine's Creek or whatever its name
Yes,
is?
St.
Okay.
Catherine's
There was talk some number of years ago about building a bridge so you could access the wonderful little tiny cemetery where Judith Sargent Murray, among others, is buried. A group of us, led by Jim Barnett.
Yes.
Yeah. Led some of us to that cemetery one time, and crossing that creek, I really believe we were in quicksand.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not kidding about that. I was happy to, get my legs out of it. But anyway, back then there was some talk of a bridge. Is that?
That's not part of our plans now, and I suspect it's because of concerns about the safety. I'm sorry that Jim Barnett did that to you. Concerns about that we're, I think, reluctant to open the site up to the river because the site closes at dusk, but it's possible for people to get on there. And but to be honest, I didn't know about that bridge, and I will certainly look into that.
It might have been just a rumor.
Well, it sounds kind of neat, so I'll look into that.
I have a question about resourcing the first step in your imaginary or hopefully extant person, finding that
Am
person.
I going to regret making that person up?
What are the records that existed and that were consolidated, and do we have any, from the transactions in Natchez at Forks of the Road and other trafficking? I mean, Mississippi, I think this museum says in 1830 we had maybe 60,000 enslaved people.
Mm-hmm.
There were over 460,000 enslaved people in 1865. That is a huge quantity of people
Right.
who were trafficked here from the eastern United States. And it seems to me those connections are also exceedingly significant. I mean, I happened to read The Ledger and the Chain and then visited Monticello, which keeps track of about 90 to 100 enslaved people there, but there were another 200 who were sold in
Right.
1827, and I can't believe someone didn't end up in New Orleans or
Right, right. Well, I'm going to first cite the project that Miranda talked about that our archivists are very committed to, which is the Lantern Project. And basically, what our archivists do is when they're processing collections, describing collections, et cetera, they are just keeping their eye out for information that might illuminate the stories of African Americans who were not included in the census records before 1877? 1870. and to sort of fill in these gaps. So that's a really important project, but I'm also, I'm going to admit my further ignorance and say that we do have the world's leading expert on tracing your African American ancestors here in the room. Ann Webster, do you have anything to add here?
From a very large slave trader, I think his name was Franklin, and he did a lot of slave trading at the forks of the road. Of course,
Okay.
it's not indexed, as I recall, so somebody's just got to read the microfilm. But that's what we do.
Okay. Well, Michael's making a note.
Any other questions, comments? If not, thank you all for being here today. Come back next Wednesday when Joan Trumpauer Mulholland and Loki Mulholland will be with us. You can subscribe to the Mississippi History newsletter to keep up with these sorts of developments, and also follow the department on social media and check the website for updates. Help me thank Miranda Vaughn and Katie Blount for this fantastic program today.